Hello and welcome to Seeing Jesus with Paul Miller. I'm Liz Voburil and I'm here with Paul and John, our colleague who's director for Asia Pacific region. So today we're coming back to this podcast station. I know it's been a little bit. We've had a brief pause here. John traveled. We shared that episode with you. And now we're coming back in and starting a new series, this Wonder series. And sort of the spine that will be guiding us as we talk is a book that Paul is in the final stages of polishing up. And it's a new book about Jesus, just taking some, as I've talked with Paul about the book along the way, I feel like it's like these are famous old oil paintings that hang in the museum. They're stories of Jesus that we all know. They're familiar. But what's available to us here is this tour with a guy who sat a really long time on the bench looking at those paintings and saw new things, new facets, always brings new aspects to light. So I want to invite you all as our listeners onto this wonderful docent-led tour that is really a rich food for your soul. So Paul, today we get started with a story, Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Which is one of our favorite stories.
Indeed.
Thanks, Liz.
And it's particularly apropos in that this is just how it falls. But listeners, I believe you're going to be getting this episode the week right after Easter. So it just is a timely spot to pause and look afresh at this resurrection scene. I'm going to go ahead and read it for us just to get the story out there. This is from John chapter 20. I'm going to be picking up the story at verse 11. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her.
Thank you, Liz. It's just great to kind of sit on this story. It's one of my, it is just, there's so many reasons that it popped to me. Probably is just so human, you know, and we'll talk about it later on. But it's just two people in a garden talking. You know, it's just like you've talked to people in a garden. You know, it's just it's so at our level, like. I mean, what would you call it in the film world, Liz? A close up, a little bit, but
a bit of a close up, situated in a very everyday-ish spot.
Right.
Quiet.
Yeah. I am used to seeing close ups because every day I watch some Hallmark movies with Kim. So
a Hallmark would have fun with this scene, but Jesus wasn't really taking the Hallmark directorial cues, I don't think.
There probably wouldn't be any Hallmark movies if this hadn't happened. Anyway, but I have distracted us. But what so struck me kind of as we go through this story is that it's just how much Jesus leaves space. And I think it's partly because the tension it's just I tend to fill space. And I should explain what I mean by that it's like you, like when you're talking, you're filling space. I'm talking about sort of relational space, where you're not dominating the conversation.
To leave space means not to dominate. To fill space is to
like it's like you can be listening, but still listening to kind of come back or something like that. But it's truly, it's like letting, and it lets Mary emerge as a person. So what's beautiful about the resurrection announcement is that we get to know Jesus and her. I mean, we'll expand on that more.
Paul, one thought as you're saying about that, it strikes me that, it is rare for a main character to stay in the margins. And that's kind of how we see Jesus acting here, right? Like he's a main character, but he's on the edge. He's like not filling up that space that you typically do.
John, you had a thought. I can tell by the look on your face.
I mean, you mentioned at the very beginning that there's the normalness of the conversation. I mean, they're at equal levels and having this conversation in the garden. And what makes it even more remarkable is just the moment itself historically.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure we'll dig more into that, but just the fact that Jesus has just been raised from the dead, and now we're having anyways, if I were to plan the story, it would not have gone like this.
Right. I mean, no one. I mean, it's just and you put your finger on what it just makes it so astounding is that this is the most important event in all human history. It is the most important event in all of space time and even outside of space time. It's the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it just, I mean, what it means for. It means there's going to be a new creation. It means that death is dying. You know, it means that hope is the final word on potentially on everything. And it like there could be no greater glory than this moment. There's no bigger announcement to make. And the only person who knows what has happened is Jesus.
Well, Paul, I'm struck by that. There's no greater glory than this moment. And I want to put like a pause, except it's really not situated in the way we do glory moments, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the paradox of it is it's there right in the dirt. It's
right in the dirt. And it's not only in the dirt, but he's so attentive to Mary Magdalene. Like it's a real conversation.
Well, as you pointed out somewhere, like he doesn't, even his first words to her are questions for her. Like, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?
Right.
So drawing her out versus, I did it, Mary. I did
it. Yeah.
I mean, if there's any moment in all of cosmic history and any person who had the right to put the spotlight solely on himself and make the announcement about himself, I mean, it's an understatement to say this was the moment that Jesus should, and he didn't. In fact, he allowed the spotlight to move around. And in fact, he moved the spotlight onto Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, as a human communication director, I would have been like, "Oh, you did what? Like, when did you spill the beans? Like, no, we got to do a press release, and we're going to arrange a venue. Like, there's a way we got to unroll this, right? That is sort of how you unroll that kind of thing. But it's not Jesus. It's not interested in that. Great advice.
And if we just unpack it, the layers of Jesus leaving space. Of the first one is he's quietly just standing there while she's talking to the angels and saying nothing. I guess quiet and saying nothing kind of are the same thing. but he's and then the second layer is that he's obviously not just standing there, but he's attentive to her, because when she turns around and makes eye contact with him, then Jesus says to ask her two questions. Why are you weeping? So he's obviously noticing that she's weeping. And then whom are you seeking? He's heard the angel conversation. So he's been attentive to her. And we don't know. I mean, one of our staff, Robert Rowe, has done a great job of sort of reflecting on Jesus. Was he actually gardening? So he could have been, we don't know. But whether he was actually looking at her, he was clearly overhearing this conversation. And then when so the first layer is he's quiet. He's just quietly there. And then the second one, he's quietly focused. And then when they finally engage, then he asks her, then she asks him two questions. Like, he has three opportunities to disclose what has just happened. Or maybe the first two are kind of wrapped in the one, because he's actually focused on her. It's not like and yet it's just so, it's kind of beyond humble. And it's actually helpful to see the relationship between humility and leaving space. Like leaving space achieves humility through quietness. It's kind of a whole way of doing life too, where you're led by the Spirit and don't always feel compelled to fill the space. And so it comes naturally to Jesus, because he is someone who's led by the Spirit.
And in that sense, you get a sense in the overall picture that Jesus is at ease in this. It's not like he's like right. covering his mouth, or he's squirming, or one of those kids who is like anxious to say something, and then
right.
and it's kind of spilling out a little bit, or they're kind of antsy. It's like he's fully in the moment, fully relaxed, and fully attentive to her in a way that's not forced, that's not contradictory to what's really going on inside. This is the truest sense of who he is at the moment.
Yeah. So all of this then climaxes, as the story has said, with Jesus saying Mary's name, which is just, so the whole conversation, the actual announcement of the resurrection, he is able to do the announcement by mentioning her name, not his. So so love envelops the whole announcement. So it's not like how do you announce the greatest event in human history, and not that you are the center of, that your physical presence is the announcement, and combine it with love, and so it's focused on another person. And Jesus pulls it off. I mean, it's kind of like a miracle inside the
It would have been so natural for him just to say, "It's me, Jesus."
Right.
Yeah. And yet he says Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also, to me, it also underscores me. This is kind of goes along with you saying it's love, but it's also very personal, right? It's not like, when I think of announcements, I guess I think of the important things to say to all the people, right? So like the Sunday morning announcements or whatever. But by making the announcement as just her name, it's for this one person who's right in front of him. This isn't a generic press release he's giving to her. It's just her name.
Yeah. It really is lovely. And it is, we're inferring that it's deliberate, that it's just Jesus, but I think it's about as clear inference as you could get from everything that Jesus does and says. But it's really clear, what underlines it is that Peter and John have come to the tomb, and Jesus has been staying in the shadows. So he deliberately avoided, and Peter and John were the leader of the disciples, the 12, and his best friend. So it's not the kind of thing you hide from your, two of your best friends who are just very distraught. So it's this willingness in leaving space, willingness to live with confusion and even with her grief. I mean, it's a very microscopic. How do you say that, Liz? It's I can't get the right, like what Jesus did with Lazarus in John 11 by deliberately waiting and Lazarus dying and the grief that he brought that happened in the family is the preparation for the glory. But it means leaving people in anguish. And it's probably a side tangent to talk about modern parenting, but there's a tendency to not want to leave our kids in anguish or or even thinking that God should not leave us in a difficult place. But it's how he works with his son and how his son works with us.
Well, and like you said, it's not just in a difficult place, but minimally it's in a confusing place. And so, my tendency is to try to bring clarity as quickly as possible to make sure there's no confusion. Yeah. And in doing so, sometimes I'm asserting my own way, my own will. I remember when I first joined seeJesus, I was coming out of pastoral ministry. And I remember, Paul, you and I would have conversations about when we're teaching, especially the Person of Jesus study, and encouraging and helping people to discover Jesus for themselves in Scripture. It takes patience and a willingness to leave some space for them to discover on their own in a led way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the preacher in me wanted to just skip to the 3 points and say, let me just tell you the 3 points and then let's look at them.
Right.
And so as you were just, even in the way that you were trying to draw people to the person of Jesus through the means of an interactive Bible study was in a sense leaving space for the Spirit to work, which also means at times there might be a little bit of dissonance or confusion.
Right.
And it also requires a trust that God is going to be moving in that as well as through the inspiration of his Scripture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen.
And that there's something to be said for the truth that you discover kind of gripping your brain differently than the truth that's like handed to you or you're passive, right? So there's something here that Jesus is, that it's better for Mary to learn this news through her own slow apprehension culminating in him saying her name versus, Jesus having a trumpeter at his side communicating.
Yeah. And it's like any good story or drama or music. I mean, it builds and it lets, so Jesus lets himself be unwrapped slowly. And John heard this story from her because we know he's left. He almost heard it. He heard it just immediately after that. But I'm sure she rehearsed this hundreds of times and people would want to hear it from her. I mean, even doing it like this was a gift to her because it just made it so much more fun. It was something to take with her in her memory for all eternity. I'm sure there's even details that we'll find out in heaven. And the other thing, I mean, and this people often mention because it's very true in the passage that he is honoring her by telling her first the announcement and then commissioning her as the person to tell the disciples. Which is, it's just there's layers of love here for her, and just the whole story is really about Mary, even though it's about Jesus. It's Mary's. So just why don't we jump into Mary? There's so many little things about her. One of the things that I love, I'll just start out mentioning this, and you guys can throw in other things too. I just love her energy. We don't know how old Mary is, but she spends a couple hours running, weeping, asking questions, seeking. She's, and you can feel her restlessness. And it's not a bad restlessness with the angels, the fact that she turns and looks around while she's talking to them.
Yes. As Paul, you have pointed out, like there's most of us, if angels were talking to us, might stop and like, oh, wow. Like what else can you talk to me about? Like,
right. Right. Like she is, just her energy is delightful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and she was part of that first trip with the disciples, right? She had made one trip already to the tomb, found him not there, went back to tell the other disciples, came back again with Peter and John. So yeah, this is.
Paul, weren't you calculating possibly how much?
I did, and I don't know what I did with that. Maybe I have it in my notes here somewhere.
I think I saw that you calculated generally, it's very possible, minimally, she ran 3 miles.
Yes.
When you count the back and forth.
Right. It depends, because it looks like the disciples, the upper room was the lower southwest quadrant of Jerusalem. And I draw a blank on my name. It was the Qumran community. That's where we're pretty sure where the
Essenes.
Yeah. It was the Essene quarter down the and it looks like Mark's house, which is the house of the Last Supper, was what tradition is pretty strong, supported by archaeology that we have the right location for that house. And so if she would have likely gone out through that gate, the Essene gate, and then traveled north up. Yeah. So she has sprinted. She had a quiet walk out there, then sprinted back with the disciples. Sorry, it chokes me up. And then sprinted back to the tomb. And then after this, now I'm assuming sprinting, but she is running. The text says she ran. So I added sprint. That's my Irish tendency to add a little drama. But anyway, and all this time when she is just, there are at least 3 mentions of her grieving or weeping. I should count them again. But she's weeping. She's pouring herself out, and yet, I'm sure she's living on adrenaline. But it's like she's being drained emotionally, and yet at the same time, she's not frozen on it because she's working. She's working to find his body.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, modern readers, we might look and say, if we just saw her in a vacuum, we would just say, "Oh, she's deranged, like she's unstable. Someone's got to help her." But in so many ways, given the context of what's happened, and given the focus and the strength of her love, she's being driven by just her dear love and concern for Jesus.
Yeah, and the one thing that she misses, she's obviously not studied the 5 stages of grief, because I think the last stage is acceptance, and again, I'm not saying that isn't a pattern that many people follow, but the beautiful thing about Christian hope. And obviously there are things in life that you come to accept, not Mary. I mean, she's just absolutely dogged, and it's actually that doggedness that Jesus picks up when he says, who are you seeking? Like, it was quite obviously that she just wasn't there. Hey, have you seen Jesus? She's hunting for his body.
Well, and even her interactions then back with the supposed gardener, perhaps he's done something with the body, or he's corroborating with other people who want to do something. But she's not going to even get into a conversation about, did you take him, or any of that, but more, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him and I will take him away. So like, she's just got she's gonna, wherever he is, whatever's going on, she's happy to just get her people on it to swoop in and make things right, however that can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. John, any thoughts on that?
No, well, I mean, related to what Liz was saying in terms of what Mary says, is you can tell she's a woman who knows how to get things done and does get things done.
Yeah.
I think I saw a short video clip. I think it was Reese Witherspoon who was talking about how she always gets, she has a hard time when she's reading a script, a potential script, and it gets to a point where a woman is in a really hard, like really emergency situation, and she turns to the man and says, "What are we going to do?" And so she turned to the audience that she was speaking to, and she said, "What woman do you know in a situation like this does not know what to do and is looking like?" And so her point, which even more so here for Mary and most of the women in my life, they're rarely ones who are sitting there going, "I don't know what to do." Like they have multiple ideas of what could be done. Let alone, if I'm speaking about my own wife, she's willing to get it done, and she knows how to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. She's not without opinions. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I just love about this, maybe that kind of puts it all together, is just her courage. C.S. Lewis says that courage is the virtue that animates all the virtues. Because it allows you to endure. Like how do you work when there doesn't seem to be any point, when hope is gone, and and now with his body missing, it's just grief upon grief. At least they had his body, and I mean this would be true in the modern world, obviously, but in the ancient worlds, especially in the Jewish world, the body was sacred. The Jews did not practice cremation just because of the sacredness of the body. And especially at that time with the belief in the resurrection. It's showing up for life when life has lost all joy and meaning and purpose. And that's a beautiful thing. It really is. Just a few other things that we know about Mary. She's from her name, Magdala, Mary Magdalene was from the town of Magdala, which was a very wealthy Jewish community on the southwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And we also know from Luke 8 that she was one of Jesus' major donors. I think we have 5 or 6 lists of the women, either at the cross or at the tomb, and she's listed first in every list, which suggests that she was a leader of the women. And she's married. We know from Luke that she's married to Herod's CFO. All of that paints a picture of a strong, gifted, talented woman. So she's not, and she's also mentioned in the apocryphal gospels quite a bit. So she had an impact. She was well known in the early Christian communities. So anyway, we could go on like that, but it's just lovely to see all those things.
So Paul, like going back to kind of where we started at the beginning about this garden, I think we've talked before also about how that calls back to mind the Garden of Eden, and maybe even some of Jesus's choice of waiting for Mary and not just talking to the guys. I don't know, but do we see her as a new kind of Eve? What's that?
Yeah, that's very much what scholars believe that Jesus is. They call it an acted parable. Like he's actually acting out a scene. And you see that all through the Gospels. You see these little acted parables, like he's really doing the event, but he's also mirroring something from the Old Testament, like it's a real event. I think scholars sometimes get confused and get frozen by the Old Testament allusions, and miss the personal. Like Jesus, like these texts are so rich, they're true at multiple levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like even for it to be a parable and to reflect back that Old Testament moment doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't love Mary and enjoy giving her this gift with all the drama, Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so it's a scene where, of course, this new Adam is not doing his own. He has not done his own will and now has brought life. And the first Adam did his own will and brought death. And now Jesus commissions Mary as the new Eve. And the early church thought the scene was that Mary represented that was a forward-looking parable too, and that Eve, that Mary Magdalene represented the church. So this is the dynamic of the creation of the Church of Jesus Christ. So there's just a lot of nuances with that. And then probably the story that helped me understand this whole passage better than any other is the Gospel of Peter, which is a fake Gnostic gospel written at least 100, maybe 150 years after the real gospel. So the Gospel of Peter, you have to understand Gnosticism, and it's very much the Greek mind, is that you want to float above life, that you want to be disembodied. And I mean, what's the equivalent in our modern American world of being floating above life? Maybe a really nice vacation, you float above life. That's not bad, but Buddhist thought is actually quite similar to it, where you want to get rid of your body. And the older you get, the more that makes sense. But anyway, Liz, why don't you read this little selection from the Gospel of Peter? So this is not true, everybody. Okay. This is what they call apocryphal. It's fake news. Okay. But go ahead.
Okay. So the soldiers guarding the tomb saw 3 men come out of the tomb. This is the tomb of Jesus. 2 of them sustaining the other one, and a cross following after them. The heads of the 2 reached up to heaven, but the head of him that was led by them went up beyond heaven.
There's a little confusing. It's very, even the writing is kind of floaty. Like it doesn't mention the names. And so we have provided a drawing of it, but maybe we could post that. But so you've got the scene then is 2 angels who are so big on either side of Jesus that their heads reach the clouds. So let's say that, the cloud ceiling was 4,000 feet or so you got a 3,000 foot angels. And then there's Jesus who's in between them, with, maybe a mile high Jesus. I mean, this is really
different. If Mary wouldn't stop and talk with an angel whose head was up in the clouds, I think that she's even more astonishing. No, just kidding.
Right. That's right. And then there's a cross followed behind. It is exactly the spectacular resurrection that we would crave and hunt for. Like it's basically go big or go home. And and what struck me when I read this, I don't know when it was, it was 25 years ago, that it was that you couldn't have a conversation with this person, and that's exactly the problem with pride. And it's exactly the problem with people who don't lower themselves in love. They're hard to have conversation with, in other words, Jesus, in this Gnostic story, he fills the room, and a narcissist, someone obsessed with themselves fills the room. And so there's no space for glory or beauty to emerge. It's kind of like skipping to the throne room in Revelation. There is a place for the glory of Jesus that is so shocking that John falls down, but it's not how the incarnate Son of God begins.
And that's the irony of it all, is Jesus has full authority and right and ability to fill the room and be the fullness of what we're describing. And yet at the apex of all of history, he does the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm savoring that idea that eye contact is impossible with someone who's way up like that, and how
Right.
very much a part of the scene we've just looked at, that eye contact is very much a part of that. And that's that personal connection and the discovery that comes along with that too. That's one thing that the filling the space leaves no meaning. Discovery is like a nanosecond when when something like that walks in. So just a really different way in which our Savior works.
And as I think my way of my natural ways of relating, because I grew up in the evangelical world, sort of a blue blood Presbyterian, my natural ways of relating very much reflect the weaknesses of the evangelical world. You know, we're trained at seminary to fill space with talking. Now, maybe you learned a little bit in counseling. Movement is wonderful to help to listen to people and draw people out, but that tends to be problems and that kind of thing. But you want to fill the space, even the vision space of your congregation as a pastor, because you don't want like the idea of waiting on prayer on something, which is a way of leaving space for God to work. Those things are just not part of our catalog of strengths. Like it just. And the world notices that at times, you know, it notices that we tend to be better at talking than listening. And again, these are all my weaknesses. It's not, I'm not saying it's them. It's something that I fight with.
John, any last thoughts from you?
I mean, I'm just thinking for myself, let alone maybe for our listeners, there's always a place in our life or a relationship where we're quicker to move to fill that space. So maybe we're not consistent across the board in every circumstance and situation, but certain relationships, certain circumstances, there's a tendency, at least on my heart, to be able to move quickly, to talk, to cast a vision, to put myself in the space, because sometimes what's uncomfortable is to leave that space, and it takes faith to leave that space to see God move in that, whether it be through prayer or whether just waiting on Him. And so it's a great reminder for myself, not just you, Paul.
Maybe just in closing, what has struck me about this whole scene is thinking of the fruits of the Spirit, that they emanate out of Jesus' whole other, his focus on Mary and his leaving space. Like you could just see them: love, joy, peace. Like the whole scene is very peaceful. His patience it's actually that the patience is sort of underlies the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe patience slash self-control. And it leads to the announcement being just very gentle. And his sheer kindness to Mary, his goodness, like you just see all the fruits of the Spirit popping, but they emanate out of Jesus himself being in step with the Spirit, which we know from particularly the Gospel of Luke that Jesus was in step with the fully human Jesus, was waiting on his Father in prayer and in step with the Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last thought then too, Paul, when you were talking earlier about like, was this planned or spontaneous in terms of how the announcement went? I was thinking about Jesus was probably just in touch with the Spirit moment by moment as the circumstances unfolded, not necessarily someone had written a 1-page plan on how to do the resurrection announcement or so, you know what I mean? Like, because there is a sort of it feels like the kind of scene that emerges from what actually happens. And it's Jesus's focus on her that leads, like, that enables it to unfold the way it does. So,
yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for listening. We will be back in another couple of weeks with another wonder of Jesus to slow down and examine and consider in fresh ways. Thanks for listening.